Night was quiet and cold in the old junkyard. The wind moved slowly between the broken cars and metal pieces. Some lights blinked far away in the city, but here everything was dark. No, one came here at night because it was full of rust and silence, but this night was different. Something bright moved across the sky like a burning star. It came fast and hot and crashed into the ground behind a big pile of trash. There was a loud sound like thunder, and then everything became still again. A boy named Ray was nearby. He was only 16, but he knew how to survive alone. He lived in a small trailer near the edge of the junkyard. He collected old parts and sold them in the market to buy food. Ray heard the crash and saw the sky light up for a second. He grabbed his flashlight and walked toward the sound. He moved slowly with careful steps because he did not know what had fallen. When he reached the place, he saw something strange buried under the metal. It was not a car or a plane or anything. From Earth, it looked like a capsule made of silver and black metal. It was round and smooth and had small lights blinking on the side. There were scratches on it like it had come from far away. Ray touched the side and it was warm. He felt a soft like the machine was still alive. There was a small screen with symbols he could not read, but one button was blinking red. Ray looked around. No one else was here. He took a deep breath and pressed the button. The capsule made a low sound like a deep breath. Then a panel opened with a slow hiss. Inside was a small girl with silver hair and pale skin. She looked like a human, but also different. Her eyes were closed, and her arms were crossed on her chest. She looked like she was sleeping, or maybe dead. Ray stepped back for a second. Then the girl's hand moved and fell out of the capsule. Ray froze. He waited. Then slowly her eyes opened. They were glowing blue in the dark. The girl sat up fast and looked around with wide eyes. She seemed scared and confused. Ray raised his hands and spoke in a soft voice. "It's okay, I won't hurt you." The girl did not speak. She looked at him with her glowing eyes. Then she tried to stand, but her legs were weak. She fell forward, and Ray caught her. She was cold and shaking. Ray took off his jacket and put it around her. He looked inside the capsule again. There was nothing else inside. Just some wires and a small broken screen. Ray helped the girl stand and started walking back to his trailer. She did not say anything, but she followed him slowly. When they reached the trailer, he opened the door and helped her sit on a chair. He gave her a blanket and a bottle of water. She looked at the water like she had never seen it before. Then she took a small sip. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes did not leave Ray's face. "Who are you? Where did you come from?" She did not answer. She looked down at her arm. There was a strange device on her wrist. It had a cracked screen and a blinking green light. Ray looked at it. "What is that, a watch, a tracker?" Still no answer. But the girl touched the device, and it made a soft beep. Then she spoke only one word, "Zara." Ray nodded. "Okay, Zara." Then the light on the device turned red. It beeped again, but louder this time. Zara looked at it and her face changed. She looked scared. Ray looked out the window. The wind had stopped. Everything was quiet, but the sky above the junkyard had started to glow again. Far away in the clouds, something was moving, something fast, something not from Earth. Ray turned back to Zara. Her eyes were full of fear, and now his were too. The junkyard was no longer just a place for broken things. It had become something else, something dangerous, something alive, and Ray knew this was only the beginning. The night was heavy, but Ray could not sleep, because the girl from the capsule was now in his trailer, and everything had changed. He sat on a small chair near the table and watched her while she rested on the bed with his old blanket around her shoulders. She looked peaceful now, but there was something about her that made the air feel strange, like a silent warning was hanging in the room. The girl was not normal. Her skin had a soft silver glow when the light hit it. Her hair moved like it remembered the stars, and her eyes, when open, were like deep sky. Not blue like Earth sky, but like something endless and unknown. Ray wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but he stayed quiet because she was still weak and scared, and maybe in pain. He made her a cup of warm water with sugar and placed it near her hand. She looked at it, and then at him. He smiled and nodded slowly. "It's safe." You can drink it. She picked up the cup with careful fingers and took a small sip. Then she looked around. The trailer, her eyes stopped at the metal walls, the old tools, the tiny window. She seemed lost, like her mind was searching for a map that did not exist. Ray sat across from her and spoke again with a soft voice. My name is Ray. This is my home. Where are you from? What is your name? She tilted her head like she was trying to understand his words. Then she pointed at herself and whispered one word. Zara. Ray repeated it slowly. Zara. Okay, nice to meet you. She nodded once. Then she touched the broken device on her wrist. Ray leaned closer to look at it. The screen was cracked but still showing strange symbols, like spinning lines and blinking dots. There was a soft sound coming from it, like it was speaking in a language too old for humans. Ray tried to touch it, but Zara pulled her arm back quick. Her eyes flashed, and her breath grew faster. Ray held up his hands to show he meant no harm. It's okay, I won't touch it. Zara looked down like she felt sorry. Then she placed the device on the table slowly. Ray watched as it blinked red again. He could feel that this thing was important, maybe dangerous, maybe alive. Suddenly the screen changed. A small image appeared. A moving picture showing a place not of Earth. A room filled with tall shadows standing around a platform. On that platform was Zara inside the same capsule, now sitting in Ray's junkyard. One of the shadows raised a hand and pointed. Another pressed a button. The capsule closed. Zara's eyes shut. Then the capsule was pushed into space. Like trash, the screen went black. Ray sat frozen. He looked at Zara and saw her eyes filled with water. She did not cry, but she looked like she had cried before, too many times to count. They threw you away. Why did they do that? She touched her chest. And then her head. Then she pointed at the sky. Then she made a small explosion motion with her fingers. Ray did not understand fully, but he felt the meaning. You were different. You were strong. They were afraid. Zara nodded. Then she pointed at the device again and shook her head. It was a tracker. Ray understood now. Someone out there knew she was here. He stood up fast and pulled the curtains closed. He checked the door. He turned off the outside light. The junkyard was dark again, but now the darkness felt full of eyes. Ray looked back at Zara and felt something strange. He had found many broken things in the junkyard. Old machines, scrap metal, lost tools, but never something like her. She was not broken. She was left behind because she scared someone. Zara sat still, but her eyes followed every sound. She was listening, learning. Ray knew they had little time. If someone had sent that capsule away like garbage, they would not want it opened. They would come maybe soon. Zara looked at his wall filled with machine parts, old wires, screens, tools. She stood up slowly and walked over. She placed her hand on a broken radio. It started working. No battery, no power, it just turned on. Ray gasped. Zara turned to him with calm eyes. She could talk to machines. She was part of them, or maybe something more. He stepped closer and spoke again. You, Re, not just alien, you're something else, something big. Zara said nothing, but her eyes said yes. She walked back to the table and sat down again. The tracker beeped once more. Then a small green light flashed outside the trailer window. Far in the sky, a shape moved behind the clouds. Ray knew then they had found her again. But this time she was not alone. This time she had him, and he would not let them take her again, not without a fight. Morning came slow with a gray sky and a cold wind that whispered across the junkyard. Ray stood outside the trailer with his hands in his pockets and his eyes scanning the sky. He did not sleep all night because the green light from the sky still moved in his mind like a warning. He could not forget. Zara stayed inside, sitting by the table holding her arm, where the tracker blinked in soft red like a heartbeat that refused to die. Ray looked at the clouds as they rolled over the sun like a curtain trying to hide the truth. Something was coming. He felt it in the air and the ground in the way. Even the birds did not sing that morning. He turned back to the trailer and stepped inside. Zara looked up at him, her face quiet, her eyes full of thoughts. She could not speak. Ray sat beside her and placed an old piece of bread on the table. She reached for it slowly and ate without a word. He watched her and wondered what her world was like before the capsule, before the fear, before this place. Ray pointed at the tracker again. and then at the capsule now covered with a tarp in the junkyard. He needed answers. He needed to know why they would send her away, and why someone might come for her. Now Zara looked at him, then reached for a wire from the wall. She touched the end of it to her wrist device, and it blinked green. The screen came to life again. More images appeared, but these were different. They showed machines not of Earth, long black ships with red lights and sharp edges. They floated in the dark around a planet that burned like fire. In one image, small figures ran and screamed as beams of light fell from the sky. Ray leaned closer. He saw the shape of Zara in a white room, wires all around her, eyes wide with fear. As tall figures watched from behind a glass wall, they studied her, tested her, and wrote strange signs on glowing tablets. Then one day a loud alarm filled the room, and everyone ran. Zara stood alone as the floor opened and the capsule rose. Ray felt cold inside. She was not just a girl, she was part of something bigger, something dangerous. Zara stopped the images and pulled back the wire. She looked at Ray with tired eyes, then spoke two slow words. "They come." Ray nodded. He knew now they would not stop until they took her or erased her, and he could not let that happen. He stood and grabbed a small device from the shelf. It was a scanner made from old radio parts and broken drones. He turned it on, and it blinked once, then again, then turned red. Something was near. Ray moved to the trailer door and opened it just a crack. In the sky, a small shape moved fast and quiet, like a shadow without sound. It was not from Earth. It was a drone with smooth metal skin and glowing eyes. Zara stood behind him and looked out the window. Her breath grew fast, her hands shook, but her face stayed calm. She knew this machine. She had seen it before. The drone dropped lower, scanning the junkyard. Ray pulled Zara back and shut the door. They needed to hide, and they needed to move fast. He opened the floor panel and pointed to the space below. Zara nodded and climbed down without a sound. Ray followed and closed the panel above them. In the dark space under the trailer, they stayed still as the drone moved above. They could hear it humming, scanning, searching. A red beam passed through the trailer wall. It stopped at the table where the tracker had blinked last. Zara held her breath. Ray watched the beam. It blinked once, then moved away. The drone hovered for a moment, then shot back into the sky, leaving a trail of light behind. Ray waited, then opened the panel again and helped Zara out. "We have to leave now." Zara nodded again. They ran to the junkyard path, past broken engines and twisted steel. Ray led her to a hidden space behind an old truck where he kept his hoverbike. It was rusty, but strong and fast enough to get far from here. He loaded a bag with tools, water, and the tracker. Zara climbed on the back and held tight. Ray started the engine, and the bike rose off the ground with a soft hum. They shot forward into the wind, past the edge of the junkyard. Behind them, the sky lit up again. Not lightning, not fire. A new ship was entering the sky. Ray looked back once, and then pushed the bike faster. Zara closed her eyes and leaned into him. She was not safe, but she was not alone, and now the hunt had truly begun. The hoverbike raced across dry fields and broken roads, leaving behind the junkyard, the trailer, the capsule, and the past. The sky above was wide and silent, but Ray knew something was watching from somewhere hidden behind the clouds or high above the stars. Zara sat behind him, holding on with one arm, while her other hand stayed on the device at her wrist, which now blinked slow and red like a dying ember. Ray did not speak, and Zara did not ask where they were going. They both knew silence was safer for now. The wind stung their faces and dust filled the air, but the hoverbike flew like a ghost through the ruins of old towns and quiet hills. After an hour, they reached a place Ray remembered from long ago, a tunnel under an old metro line, half buried in stone and vines. No one came here now, not even scavengers. Ray stopped the bike and helped Zara climb off. She looked around at the broken concrete, the rusted beams, the dark entrance that seemed to breathe cold air. It was not home, but it was hidden, and that was enough. They walked inside slowly as the walls swallowed them, and the light behind faded away inside the tunnel. Ray lit a small lantern and set it on the ground. The weak light showed cracked tiles and fallen pipes, but also silence and safety. Zara sat down on a blanket. Ray kept in his bag and took a deep breath. She looked at him with eyes full of questions and fear, but also a strange fire that had not died. Ray sat across from her and opened a small case. Inside was an old tablet powered by a solar patch and filled with codes and languages and maps he had found over the years. He turned it on and showed her an image of her capsule. Zara nodded slowly, then touched the screen and pulled up new images from her wrist device. The pictures were old but real. They showed a lab filled with light and machines. She was younger, maybe smaller, standing in the bay center with wires around her and bright energy flowing through her hands. Ray watched as more images came, charts, symbols, flashes of stars. Zara pointed to one set of symbols and then to herself. Ray leaned closer, trying to read them, but they made no sense. She drew a line with her finger from the star map to a point near Earth. Then she circled the point and tapped it twice. Ray stared at the screen and understood something clear. She was not sent here by accident. She was aimed like a weapon, like a message or maybe a key, and someone wanted that key locked forever. Zara touched her chest, then her head, then made a motion like a door opening. She was trying to say something important. Ray waited and watched, and then it clicked in his mind. Backed in his mind. You were made, not born. Zara nodded. She was created by hands, not parents, by minds, not hearts. She was part machine, part living, part something else. And they called her defective because she did not obey. Ray felt his chest tighten as he looked at her. She was not a threat. She was scared and strong and kind. But those who made her feared her, and those who feared her now hunted her. Stood and paced the tunnel, thinking fast. They needed help. They needed someone who could read the alien code and explain the device and the images, and maybe give them a chance to fight back. Ray remembered a name: Mara, an old friend of his father, a scientist who had left the labs and vanished after saying too much about things no one believed. He turned to Zara and said the name Mara. She looked up and her eyes showed hope, like she had heard it before. They left the tunnel at night and rode again under the stars. No words, only the sound of wind and the soft hum of the hoverbike. Ray followed broken signs and hidden paths until they reached a quiet hill with one lonely cabin standing in the trees. He knocked once, then twice. The door opened slow, and a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes stepped out. She looked at Ray and then at Zara and said one word: come. Inside the cabin was full of screens, books, metal pieces, and lights that blinked like stars. Mara moved fast, reading Zara's device and typing into her own tablet. She spoke in soft tones, but her eyes were wide with fear and wonder. She turned to Ray and whispered a truth that hit like a storm. She is not just powerful, she is the last of her kind. They made her to control the machine world, but she broke the control. Zara sat silent, but her eyes told everything. She had seen what they did to others like her. She had felt the pain of being locked away, of being called a mistake. Ray stepped beside her and put a hand on her shoulder. He looked at Mara and asked one final question: can she stop them? Mara did not answer right away. She stared at the screen as a new signal appeared, a ship getting closer. Then she looked up and said what Ray feared most: only if she learns before they arrive. The cabin was quiet, but the air felt thick, like it was holding a secret that wanted to break free. Ray stood near the window, watching the sky shift from deep night to pale gray. Zara sat at the far end of the room, her eyes closed, her hands resting on her lap while soft pulses of light moved across her skin. Mara moved between machines, typing fast, reading faster, her mind chasing answers hidden in lines of alien code. Outside, the wind began to rise, carrying leaves and dust across the field. The trees whispered, and the clouds rolled low, like they knew something was coming. Ray felt it too, not just fear, but pressure, a storm in his chest that would not stop growing. Mara called out to him, her voice steady, but her face pale. She pointed to the screen, and he walked over the data, showed Zara's design, the lines of energy moving through her body, the connection between her mind and machines. It also showed something locked deep inside her, something asleep, something old. Ray looked at the shape on the screen. It was not a weapon like a gun or a bomb. It was a pattern, a code that could rewrite systems shut down. Networks changed the structure of machines like a master key for every door ever built. Zara was not just powerful, she was the program, the signal, the tool, and the user all in one. Ray turned to her and saw her watching now, her eyes glowing soft like stars at rest. Mara whispered that this ability was not taught or installed, it was born into her design. She could take control of any machine given enough time and focus, but there was a danger. If she tried too soon or with too much power, her body might burn from within, and her mind might shatter like glass. Ray stepped closer to Zara and sat down across from her. He spoke with slow words, careful, like stepping on ice. They made you to control their world, and now they want to erase you because you broke free. But you are not just code, you are choice. Zara looked at him, then at Mara, then at her own hands. She touched her chest and the device at her wrist lit up again, but this time it was green, not red. A calm pulse like a breath. Mara placed a small device on the table, something like a transmitter, something old and strange. She said they could use it to test her link safely. If she could connect to it and control it without breaking it, then maybe she was ready. Zara nodded and placed her fingers on the metal. The cabin lights flickered. The machines hummed. The air grew still. Ray felt the moment shift like time holding its breath. Zara's eyes opened wide, and the device floated off the table without strings or wires. It turned slowly in the air, glowing softly as if listening to her thoughts. Then it stopped and settled back on the table. Silent and calm, Mara smiled for the first time, and Ray let out a breath. He did not know he was holding. Zara had done it. She was learning to control the gift that once trapped her. But outside, the sky cracked with light and sound. A ship had entered the atmosphere, moving low and slow across the clouds. Its shadow fell over the trees, over the hills, and over the cabin itself. Ray rushed to the window and saw the shape, the same dark metal he had seen in the vision from Zara's wrist. They had come. Mara ran to a wall and pressed a hidden panel. A hatch opened, leading to a narrow tunnel under the floor. Ray grabbed Zara's hand and pulled her toward it, but she stopped and looked back at the cabin. She shook her head, then stepped forward and placed both hands on the wall. The lights blinked, then turned blue. A shield rose around the cabin, not made of steel but energy. Thin, clear, strong, and alive. Zara turned and spoke the first full sentence Ray had heard from her since the beginning. "Will not run again." Ray stared at her, heart pounding, fear rising. But she looked calm, not angry, not afraid. Only ready. The ship above opened a hatch and sent a beam of red light toward the cabin. Zara raised one hand and the beam stopped mid-air, frozen. Like a photograph, Mara gasped and began recording everything. Ray stepped beside Zara and whispered her name. "You are not a weapon. You are hope." Zara looked at him and nodded once, then turned her eyes to the sky. The ship hovered, waiting, watching, testing her strength. Mara whispered that the final signal, the one inside her, the true key, still needed activation from the original source. The capsule. Ray understood what they had to do. They had to go back to the junkyard, back to the place where it all began. Zara touched her wrist, and the signal pulsed stronger. Now the ship above paused, then turned slightly, then moved away. It was not retreating. It was waiting. Zara had sent a message. She was ready. The world held its breath as the ship hovered far above the earth, like a giant shadow cast by something ancient and cold. Ray stood near the edge of the shield, watching the sky, watching the storm, waiting for something to break. Inside the cabin, Zara sat still, her fingers tracing the edge of her wrist device while her eyes stayed locked on nothing and everything at once. Mara moved from screen to screen, collecting signals, tracking movements, decoding messages, but none of it could stop what was coming. A message had arrived through an old satellite channel, cracked and broken, but clear enough to understand. The voice was low and empty, without emotion, without warmth. It gave a choice: turn over the girl or face destruction. Ray listened in silence as the message played again and again, like a cold countdown without a clock. He turned to Zara and saw no fear in her face, only silence, only thought. She was not surprised. She knew they would ask for her. She knew this choice was coming. Mara said the world had already answered. A group of leaders had voted in secret. They chose to hand her over to protect their cities, their people, their lives. They would call it peace, but it was fear wearing a mask. Ray felt anger rise in his chest like fire trapped in glass. They did not know her. They did not care. They only saw what they feared, and what they feared they tried to bury. Zara stood slowly and walked to the window. She watched the horizon where the light began to fade and the shadow of the ship grew longer. She touched the glass and whispered a word too soft to hear. Then she turned back and looked at Ray. She pointed to the map on the table, where the junkyard sat marked with red. Ray shook his head and stepped forward. You can't go. They'll take you. They'll hurt you. Zara placed her hand on his and looked into his eyes with a calm deeper than space itself. She did not speak, but her meaning was clear. If she ran, others would fall. If she fought, others might rise. Mara handed Zara a small device. It looked like a stone but pulsed with energy from the core of her capsule. It was the final key. It could unlock her full ability. But once used, it could not be undone. Zara took it and closed her fingers around it like a promise. Ray grabbed his bag and stepped toward the door, but she stopped him with a soft gesture. This was her path, not his. He refused to move back. He had come too far to let her walk alone into fire. Mara opened the shield and the wind rushed in like a warning that could not speak. They left the cabin behind, riding the hoverbike through fields and roads that now felt heavy with silence. Above them, the ship moved slowly, watching without blinking, without rest. The junkyard came into view just as the sun began to sink behind the hills. It looked the same as before, silent, broken, scattered. But now every piece of metal seemed to watch them. Every shadow seemed to breathe. They reached the capsule, still half buried beneath twisted steel. Zara walked to it without pause. She placed the device on the door, and the panel opened with a soft sound like breath returning. Inside, the light pulsed again, not dead, just waiting. She stepped inside and sat in the same place she had once slept, alone in fear. Ray stood outside, his heart beating like thunder in his ears. The ship above moved closer. Now a low sound filled the sky, like a growl too deep to come from any living thing. Zara pressed the device to her chest and closed her eyes. The capsule lit up from within. The junkyard shook. Old machines sparked to life. Ray stepped back as the ground cracked and beams of light shot upward. The ship responded with a roar, sending a beam of its own toward the earth. Zara opened her eyes, glowing now with light not her own, but something ancient. And awake, she raised her hand and the beam bent away like wind around a mountain. She rose from the capsule, floating now with wires and metal pieces swirling around her like stars. Ray watched as the machines in the junkyard moved with her, not against her. They were answering her like children to a mother. Mara's voice came through the radio, telling Ray that energy levels were beyond measurement. Zara had connected with every signal, every code, every system in the area. She was the network. She was the key. She was the storm. The ship above began to shake as its lights flickered. Zara raised both hands and sent a wave of energy upward, not with anger, but with truth. She was not broken. She was not lost. She was awake. The ship began to rise, pulling away from the earth like a beast in retreat. Zara lowered herself to the ground, her eyes dim now, her breath slow. Ray ran to her and caught her as she fell. She looked up at him and smiled, weak but full. She had chosen to fight not with destruction, but with her voice, with her truth, with her light, and the world had listened. The sky turned gold as the sun rose over the horizon, painting light across the broken junkyard, where silence now held every corner like a blanket after a storm. Zara lay still, her body resting among scattered wires and quiet machines, her breath soft, her glow dim but alive. Ray sat beside her, his hands around hers, watching her chest rise and fall with the slow rhythm of someone who had given everything but was not gone. Above them, the ship had vanished into the clouds, leaving behind only silence and shadow. But silence was never forever, and shadow never truly left. Mara arrived an hour later in an old rover, her eyes wide as she stepped into the yard, filled with metal that now pulsed with energy like a heart waiting for command. She looked at Zara, then at Ray, then at the capsule, now empty but still warm. Ray helped lift Zara into the rover. and they returned to the cabin where she could heal in peace while the world outside spun faster than ever. Before the news spread across channels and wires and satellites faster than anyone could stop it, a light had risen from a junkyard and pushed a ship back into the stars. People whispered about it first, then spoke louder, then shouted. Some called it a miracle, some called it a threat, but everyone knew something had changed. The same leaders who once chose silence now demanded control. They sent teams to search the junkyard, to scan for signals, to collect what they could not understand. Mara blocked them with data too. Complex to challenge, Ray stayed silent and guarded the door. Zara slept and healed, and listened to the stars through dreams no one else could see. Then, one day the stars answered back. Mara picked up the signal first, a strange pattern in the static. Something old but alive. Zara opened her eyes before anyone could speak. She walked to the center of the room and reached out her hand. Signal was a call, but not from the ones who had created her. It was from others like her. Not many, but enough to matter. Ray watched as she connected to the code floating through space like a thread across time. He felt it in his bones, not words, but feeling she was not alone anymore. But not all signals bring peace. Another ship entered the system, silent and cold. Not the same as before. This one was larger, darker, moving with purpose, not fear. Mara scanned the patterns and found the truth buried deep in the signal. The ship was a failsafe, a destroyer left behind in case the first mission failed. It did not want her back. It wanted her erased. Zara stood calm as wind outside howled and trees bent. Ray moved beside her, ready to fight, ready to fall, ready to do what he could not do before. Mara opened a panel in the floor, revealing a core she had hidden for years, a machine that could send a message strong enough to reach across the stars or destroy anything too close. She looked at Zara and asked without words. Zara nodded and stepped toward the machine. She placed her hands on the frame and let the energy flow from her core to its heart. The lights in the room dimmed, the walls trembled, the air thickened with pressure like a wave about to break. Ray backed away and watched as Zara rose from the ground, her body glowing brighter than ever. She was not weak. She was not tired. She was ready. The ship entered orbit, sending down black beams that tore through clouds and cut across sky. Zara raised one hand and the beams bent like rivers against stone. She closed her eyes and reached deeper into the core, into herself, into the network of machines across Earth. Old satellites woke up, buried tech sparked to life. Forgotten machines opened their eyes. Ray saw the world change in seconds. Cities blinked with new light. Old systems hummed. With a voice not heard before, she was speaking through everything. The Fombusde ship above fired again, sending down a final wave meant to erase, not strike. Zara lifted both hands and caught the wave in silence. Then she spoke with no sound, just thought, just truth. I am not yours. The wave broke. The ship shook. The sky opened. Ray felt the ground move as the core inside the cabin lit up and sent one pure signal into the sky. It passed through the ship, through space, through time. Not a weapon, but a memory. A message of creation, a seed of change, a beginning, not an end. The ship stilled, its lights flickered. Then it turned and left, not in defeat, but in understanding. Zara landed slowly, her eyes soft, her hands open, her body calm. Ray ran to her and held her as the world slowly settled again. Mara stepped outside and watched the sky, now clear, now quiet. She turned to Ray and smiled for the first time in days. She did it. Zara opened her eyes and looked at Ray, not afraid, not alone. He smiled back and whispered with shaking breath, "You saved us." She shook her head and looked up once more. "We saved each other."